does not always come with noise or chaos. Sometimes it slips into the heart during ordinary moments, early mornings, sleepless nights, long pauses between prayers. It settles into thoughts, questions, and uncertainties, slowly shaping the way we see ourselves, our future, and even God. This is the story of such a moment. And it is also a story of hope, the weight of an unseen battle. Elijah stood at the bus stop just before sunrise, his breath visible in the cold air. The street was quiet, almost peaceful, but his heart felt anything but calm. His backpack hung heavily on one shoulder, though it carried little more than books and notebooks. The real weight was inside him: fear, doubt, and exhaustion from carrying worries he rarely spoke about. To anyone passing by, Elijah looked like any other young man starting his day, but inside, a storm was raging. Fear of failure. Fear of disappointing others. Fear that he was walking the wrong path and didn't even know it. He had always believed in God. Faith was part of his upbringing, part of his language, part of his identity. But lately, belief felt harder to hold on to. Life had not turned out the way he expected, and every setback seemed to whisper the same question: where is God in all of this? The bus arrived with a low rumble. Elijah stepped inside, found a seat near the window, and stared out as the city began to wake. Buildings passed by, then streets, then faces, each one carrying a story he would never know. I'm tired of being afraid, he thought. I just don't know how to stop. Prayers without words. That evening, Elijah sat alone in his room. The light from his desk lamp cast long shadows on the walls. His phone lay face down, silent, messages unanswered, calls unreturned. He opened his Bible, not with confidence, but with habit. The pages fell open to a place marked long ago. He read without focus at first, his mind drifting back to his problems. Deadlines. Decisions. Expectations. Finally, he stopped and closed his eyes. God, he whispered, I don't even know what to ask anymore. No long prayer followed, no carefully chosen words, just silence and a heart waiting. Moments passed. Then a verse surfaced in his mind, one he had heard many times but never truly listened to. Do not be afraid, for I am with you. Elijah opened his eyes. He read the verse on the page. Then he read it again. It felt different this time. Not distant. Not general. Personal. Still, fear didn't vanish. But something else appeared alongside it. A quiet sense of comfort, like a hand resting gently on his shoulder. The night of questions. That night, Elijah couldn't sleep. His mind replayed conversations from the past, things he wished he had said, choices he wished he had made differently. Fear has a way of revisiting old memories and turning them into accusations. You should have known better. You missed your chance. It's too late now. He sat up in bed and looked out the window. The sky was dark, but a few stars were visible. Small points of light, steady and unafraid of the darkness around them. God, Elijah said quietly, if you're with me, why do I still feel so lost? There was no voice from the sky, no sudden miracle. But slowly, gently, another truth formed in his heart. Being afraid does not mean God is absent. Sometimes fear exists not because God has left, but because we are being asked to trust Him in new ways. A memory from the past. The next day, Elijah visited his grandmother. Her house was old and small, filled with warmth and familiar smells. She had always been a woman of faith, not loud or dramatic, but steady. As they sat at the kitchen table, she noticed the heaviness in his eyes. "You're carrying something," she said. Elijah hesitated, then nodded. "I'm scared all the time," he admitted. "About the future. About making the wrong choices. About disappointing God." His grandmother smiled gently. "Do you know how many times the Bible says, 'Do not be afraid'?" Elijah shook his head. "Hundreds," she said softly. "Not because people weren't afraid, but because they were." She reached across the table and took his hand. God never promised a life without fear. He promised His presence in the middle of it. Those words stayed with Elijah long after he left her house. Fear and faith walking together. Days turned into weeks. Elijah still faced the same challenges. His circumstances hadn't changed overnight, but his response to fear slowly began to shift. When fear whispered, "You can't do this," Elijah answered, "God is with me." When fear said, "You're alone," he reminded himself, "God has not left me." Faith did not remove the uncertainty. It gave him courage to move forward anyway. He began to understand something important. Courage is not the absence of fear, it is obedience in spite of it. The moment of decision. One afternoon, Elijah received an opportunity he had been hoping for, but also dreading. It required commitment, responsibility, and the risk of failure. Fear returned immediately. What if you're not ready? What if you fail? What if this proves you're not enough? Elijah sat quietly, his heart racing. Then he remembered the verse again. "Do not be afraid, for I am with you." Not, "Do not be afraid because you are strong." Not, "Do not be afraid because you are prepared." But because God is with you. That truth changed everything. Elijah said yes, walking through uncertainty. The journey that followed was not easy. There were mistakes. There were moments of doubt. There were nights when fear returned louder than before. But there was also growth. Elijah learned to pray honestly, not pretending to be brave, but trusting God with his fear. He learned to listen for God's voice not only in victories, but in struggles. He learned that God's presence was not proven by comfort, but by faithfulness. Each step forward felt like walking on unfamiliar ground, but he was no longer walking alone. A quiet transformation. Over time, Elijah noticed something surprising. Fear no longer controlled him. It still appeared. It still tried to speak, but it no longer decided his direction. Faith had grown, not suddenly but steadily. He realized that God had not changed his situation as much as he had changed his heart. And that change was deeper, stronger, and lasting. One morning, as Elijah stood once again watching the sunrise, he felt peace. Not because everything was perfect, but because he trusted the one who was guiding him. God's message for you today. If you are reading this and feeling afraid, this message is for you. God sees you. God knows what you are facing. God understands the fear you may not even have words for. And He says to you today, do not be afraid. I am with you. Not after you figure everything out, not when you become stronger, not when the fear disappears. Now, you may not know what tomorrow holds. You may feel uncertain, tired, or overwhelmed. You may be carrying questions that feel too heavy, but you are not alone. God walks with you through every step. God strengthens you when you feel weak. God remains faithful.